Hi, I'm Aaron from the Michigan School of Apologetics. The very first question that someone asked me when I was 19 years old was, why did God put the tree in the garden? And the next thing he said was, it's like taking candy from a baby, meaning that it's just so unfair. Why would God do that? That's a very popular question, and so obviously if I was asked that question at 19, I've had a lot of time to think about it. Well, I think the answer to the question might be a little bit more simpler than we imagine. So I think the answer to the question is because he wanted to, because he could. There was nothing wrong, unfair about it. See, a lot of times as Americans, we put God on the stand and we make him to be the one that has to give a defense for what he does. And God is God. God is the creator. And God can do as he wishes. Now, of course, God's not going to do anything that contradicts his nature. He's not going to lie, steal, those kind of things. But does God have the right to put a tree in the Garden of Eden and tell man that he can't eat from it? Sure he can. It's kind of like a mom bringing home Cocoa Puffs and putting them on the counter and saying, now, I bought those, they're mine, you can't eat them. Now, would that be hard for her kids or hard for her teenager, let's say? Sure it would. Would it be a temptation? Yeah, but temptation is not a sin. So does a parent have the right to have something that's theirs and say, you can't touch it, you can't eat it? Well, sure. So God has the right, as creator, to put something in the Garden of Eden and say, hey, that's mine, don't eat of it. And sure, God can do that. So God has every right as a creator to do that. There's no unfairness to that. Temptation is not a sin, and God was not at fault. Now, some people say, well, God knew that Adam and Eve would eat from the tree. Well, that's true. In Revelation chapter 13, it says that Jesus was slain before the foundation of the world, meaning that when God created, he knew that he would have to save and redeem and die for his people. And so how do you understand that one? It was kind of like the parent-child relationship again. A parent who typically knows how children act would know that the moment they choose to give birth to a child, they know that they're going to bring that child into a difficult world. They know the child is going to disobey them, hurt others, and disobey God, and there is no guarantee that any child will be in heaven. But isn't it interesting that we do it anyway? We have children anyway. Why? Because we believe that the good will outweigh the bad, that there's hope, there's redemption, that God is merciful, and that God saves. Well, God did the same thing in the Garden of Eden. He put a tree there. He said, that's mine, don't touch it. There's nothing wrong with that. Did God know that Adam and Eve would sin? And by the way, when Adam and Eve did sin, it was a cosmic lesson about the horror of what sin is and what sin does and what rebellion does against God. But when Adam and Eve did disobey, God didn't say literally, to hell with you. No, God had a plan. God had a remedy. And just like as parents, we believe that having children is still a good thing. God believed that still creating free beings with the ability to choose right and wrong, even though they would sin, that the good would outweigh the bad. Why? Because in Adam and Eve disobeying, there was also the hope of redemption, the hope of salvation. And so now as human beings, there's sin in the world, there's death in the world as a result of sin, but in that we can be rescued and redeemed and saved. So now, in God's cosmic plan, God allows man to sin, but then man can be saved. And now we will sing the praises of God for all eternity, for those who know him, of God as a savior, a rescuer, not just a creator, but a savior and a rescuer. And so that's some of the reasons why I think God allowed to put the tree in the garden. Again, man would sin, but man would be redeemed. Aren't you glad, if you're watching this, that you're redeemed, that you know God, even though you've fallen, even though you've messed up, but that God has rescued you? And aren't you glad that you're alive and that you have the hope of one day seeing Jesus? God thought so too.